It's Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Alan Lowenthal. He's a member of the United States Congress. And sir, it appears you made history. Recently, you flew the pride flag, that rainbow-colored flag, outside of your congressional office in Washington, D.C. And I guess the House historian believes it's probably the first time that happened.
Right, that we know of.
Right.
That may have happened before, but the House historian has come up and taken pictures and said, to their knowledge, this is the first time, because that it's been flown. What it is that outside of every office there are, on the left side, there's the as you walk in, the American flag, or the right as you leave, right on the left. And then there's the flag of your state. And then there's the ability to fly next to the flag of your state, one other flag that the member chooses. Most of the time, we have not flown any other. This was the first time we purchased the flag.
Why did you do this?
Because we think that this is a great historic moment in terms of the struggle for civil rights and human rights.
And you did it on the day that the U.S. Supreme Court.
And will this. You know, they recently have been talking about this, and the decision will come out this June, and we are going to continue to fly it until the freedom to marry is held by all people in this country. The ability to have that freedom, to have that right.
Well, it's interesting. So you could be flying it for a long time.
Could be flying it for a long time.
Because, you know, I'm a lawyer, but that's dangerous because I know a little bit about a lot of it. But it appears, based upon the arguments, that there may be some ruling in favor of gay and lesbian marriage rights, but it likely won't be 50 states sweeping. Just
right.
prognostication.
And that's what the people are, you know, the pundits are saying also, Brad, that it may be more narrowly defined to just dealing with Proposition 8 in California. Right. That would be a great step forward, too.
I do want to get a sense from you, though. You know, we are in California, and just very significant majorities seem to be supporting same-sex marriage, despite the fact Prop 8 passed a few years ago.
Yes.
I do want to get a sense from you, though. I mean, you have the chance to talk to members from throughout the nation.
Yes.
What is their feeling about this issue from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan or from the mountains of Tennessee? It just seems as if we so often forget that we really are on the coast. I mean, this is called the left coast for a reason.
I agree with you in the sense that we cannot just presume that the experiences that we're feeling here are the same that the rest of the nation is. And they're not the same as the rest of the nation. But I will say about this issue, I've been now working on issues of human rights for the LGBT community for 25 to 30 years now.
You happen to represent a district with a significantly large LGBT community.
Yeah, but when I first started in Long Beach, before I was on the Long Beach City Council, when I was a member of the Human Relations Commission, and we were dealing in the 1980s with bullying of lesbian and gay kids, of harassment by police. We've seen an evolution even here, and I think what we're saying is that this is not just going to be now in California on the West Coast or the East Coast. We may be slightly ahead of the rest of the nation, but these values of acceptance of people for who they are and not because of is sweeping the nation.
And it's so interesting
because people are finding that their own families, they're LGBT.
Well,
folks.
we could talk about Senator Rob Portman.
That's exactly
out of Ohio. His son
right.
apparently very eloquently wrote an article in the Yale publication talking about his coming out.
That's right, Brad.
I was fascinated that Bob Barr, a former congressman from Georgia, he was the main sponsor of the Defense of Marriage Act.
Right.
He's now come out against.
Right, and that I think speaks to what I'm saying, and as striking as it is for us to hear it here, it is even more striking in Georgia and Ohio, and there is tremendous changes that are taking place in those states also.
I hearken back to my law school days, and I remember learning about the case Loving versus Virginia, which was the case in the 60s that outlawed miscegenation laws, which was interracial marriage. I mean, I can't even imagine that in my lifetime there were laws that prevented different races from marrying. And I'm wondering if that's how people will look at 2013 when we're gone.
I think so. I think so. You know, I'm older than you are. I remember.
Right.
I remember segregation in the South. I remember separate drinking fountains,
Right.
separate places where you could eat, where you could sit. The civil rights movement, and what a struggle that it was.
But what's interesting as well, sir, is that, you know, again, we're on the coast. We see things a certain way, and I'm neutral. I'm not taking a position one way or the other. But we think about those that are deeply religious, and they are, you know, just profoundly offended by the possibility that people of the same sex could get married. They look at the Bible and they say to themselves, the Bible is clear. I don't care what the Supreme Court says. I don't care what law said. It's God's law that only opposite sex should get married. How do we, you know, we're one nation. How do we line up?
Well, first, it's to appreciate that and to not to belittle it, but that really the Bible and the message of Jesus was really about loving and commitment and caring for each other. And I think really what the gay and lesbian community is saying is that, as all of us who are supportive of marriage equality are saying, is that we believe in the sanctity of marriage, but truly marriage and the protections that marriage brings really bring about stability in our society. And what we're talking about is not hurting existing forms of marriage, but strengthening it, talking about marriage in terms of commitments and relationships, and that all people should enjoy that. And we evolve on, you know, the Bible literally has many things that we no longer take for granted. Things
Human sacrifices.
Right. And I think the real message of the Bible is commitment for each other, caring for each other, a moral code, how to live our lives. And I think this is very consistent with that. And I think that's why many Christians support marriage equality. Many Christians.
You have been in the Congress now for a few months.
Yes.
You're on the Foreign Affairs Committee, an impressive assignment, natural resources.
Yes.
Talk to us about how it has been. You spent many years in Sacramento. You spent years on the city council here in Long Beach. Give us a sense. We want a little insight.
Well, you know, each place, it's always an excitement. You know, when I went to the city council, there were 9 of us.
Right.
I thought that was the world, that was it, and a mayor, and it was face to face with your constituents, and whatever you decided when you went to the drugstore, you went to the supermarket, people reminded you of your vote. Then I went to the state legislature. It was a larger fishbowl. The issues were larger. I was all of a sudden voting on issues of water policy. I didn't know really very much about water policy. I still kept my commitment to working on local issues, much on port issues and air quality. But the world became larger. Now in Washington, I realize, and especially being on foreign affairs, that I'm that right now my world vision has expanded greatly.
No doubt.
I am now visited, like I have been visited by almost every ambassador.
Wow.
Wanting just to explain what they would like to see the United States do, their country, introducing me. I've learned tremendously about some of the crises that are going on in the world.
What did you make of President Obama's recent trip to Israel, for example?
It was a very important thing for the president to go. Very interesting that you ask. The president was quite concerned about the impression that he would make.
Right.
Just before he left that week, the Jewish members of Congress were invited to the White House to hear a briefing on, and which was led by Vice President Biden. The president was not there, but the president's chief advisors, to share with us just what his itinerary was and did we have any input into it. And I was struck with how important he thought it, that he wanted to send a message of a two-state solution. He wanted the Israelis to understand that he knew the historical context of Israel, more so than just the Holocaust, and that's why the visit to Theodore Herzl's gravesite, that he was there for peace, and that he wanted to speak to students. He wanted to talk, and it was wonderful.
His name is Alan Lowenthal, member of the United States Congress. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you for joining us, sir. This is Charter California Edition. Welcome back to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Susan Wise. She is the president of the Long Beach Board of Port Commissioners. Did I say that correctly?
You did.
Perfect. I'm surprised. I want to talk about the Long Beach Port, the twin ports, and get a sense of how vitally important those ports are to the Los Angeles area, Southern California, and the nation.
Okay. Well, these two ports collectively have 40% of the cargo coming into the United States is coming right through our ports.
Huge.
It's absolutely huge, and it's critical to the whole country. Every congressional district in the United States receives cargo that passes through these ports.
And as I understand it, and I've seen estimates that possibly 750,000 jobs are reliant throughout kind of Central to Southern California on the ports.
Yeah, I think of it in terms of the Port of Long Beach because that's the port that I work with. But I think it's 1 out of 8 jobs in Long Beach is related to the port.
Right.
So that's about 30,000 jobs, 300,000 jobs in Southern California,
right,
and over 1 million jobs
so that would make
in
sense,
the country.
Considering the twin ports are twins and
exactly,
they're pretty much equal.
Exactly.
And there's more good news coming out of the Port of Long Beach. Why don't you explain for us what the Middle Harbor project is, because it really is a monster.
It is. This is a great project for our port, and one of the reasons it's great is because it demonstrates to the world how ready the Port of Long Beach is and how ready we're going to be for all the competition in the international trade industry. But at Middle Harbor, what we're doing is we're taking 3 old terminals and combining them. And collectively, they will be the most efficient, the greenest, the most productive terminal, most modern terminal in the world.
And is it a $5 billion project, is that right?
It's not that big.
Okay, I thought it was...
It's $1.2 billion
okay,
approximately.
Billions.
But
yeah.
I think the number that you're thinking of is the amount of the lease, the value of the lease that we signed with OOCL.
Got it.
Because OOCL and LBCT are the longtime tenant. We signed a 40-year lease with them last year, which is worth about $4 billion or so in revenues to the Port of Long Beach. So we secured our future with that project.
No doubt. And you mentioned the competition from other harbors. I mean, there's not only competition domestically, both on the Pacific and the Atlantic side, but we're always thinking about the Panama Canal and the mantra, beat the canal, because they also have been moving forward. And so what I understand is Long Beach is ready.
Long Beach is very much ready. What some people don't realize about the Panama Canal is that the canal that they are building is already too small for some of the ships that have already been built.
Oh, wow.
So the Panama...
How'd that happen? What went wrong there?
Well, the carriers are building bigger and bigger ships, and that's because it's more efficient to use bigger ships, and it's much cheaper in terms of the fuel. So what we've had to do is get our port ready for those big ships, and we already are receiving 12,000 TEU ships into our port.
Means?
TEU is a 20 equivalent unit.
Okay.
It's actually, most of the containers you see on the road are 40-foot containers, but we measure everything in terms of 20-foot containers, and sometimes you'll see the short ones as well.
You mentioned that Middle Harbor will be green, and I guess as an Angelino myself from this region, I'm glad to say that this is not a new event for the harbor, for the port, because over the last decade we have seen tremendous greening efforts plugging in. I mean, it just goes on and on.
No, we have really a great story. Since 2005, we've reduced emissions from port operations by 75%.
How?
Well, a lot of it had to do with changing engines. We have changed the engines on a lot of the equipment in the yards, the cranes, the hustlers, the equipment that's in the yards. The Clean Trucks program. I mean, think of it. We took thousands of trucks, and I don't mean we, it was...
Well, it was a joint collaborative effort.
Right, it was a program that the ports put in place, but industry stepped up to the plate, and they converted their trucks to clean diesel. And so we have tremendously reduced emissions. Meanwhile, we do have this electrification project going on, which is the plug-in that, that you're speaking of.
Explain that, because it really is, as I understand it, one of the big drivers behind decreasing emissions.
Well, right now, or previously at least, when ships came to dock, they would continue to run their engines.
They would be idling.
Exactly, and they burn diesel. They still need to keep the engines going when they're at dock for various reasons, including the fact that some of the cargo is refrigerated. So what we are doing is we're electrifying the terminal, and they are, so first of all, the ship converts its engine, or it's a new ship that has a different kind of engine that allows that when it comes to dock, instead of running diesel, it just plugs in, like you would if you had a motorhome and you were in a
It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
So there's a big plug. There literally is a big plug that is connected in a cord that goes from the ship to the dock, and they plug in and they burn electricity rather than diesel while they're sitting in port, which they do for several days while they're loaded and unloaded.
If we were speaking a couple months ago, I think I would have been a little more nervous about the future for the port, because surprisingly there had been some real labor strife. And specifically, there had been one very small union that was able to cause a lot of dislocation. But fortunately, as we speak today, the labor picture is much brighter.
I think it is, and labor is really, really an important part of what goes on at the port. They're a very important segment. The contract between the ILWU and the employers will come up for renewal next year, but I know that they excuse me, are already talking, and I'm very optimistic. I mean, I've talked to people on both sides of the table, and I've seen them recently present at a conference together. The ILWU has traveled to Hong Kong with terminal operators to see how things are done there. So I think there's a real conversation going on between labor and the employers, and I'm very optimistic that that everybody wants this to work, because there's so much at stake for everybody.
At the same time, there are some clouds, and that is as a result of actions not here in Southern California, but in Washington, D.C.
Right.
The sequester has gone into effect, and as I understand it, I mean, the port does get certain federal dollars, and it also has certain federal agencies operating within it, Customs, Homeland Security, and so how is the port being impacted by the federal sequester?
We are starting to see some impact from that, and we hope very much that Washington will see fit to put things back in place to get things righted. I think the most immediate way that it's affecting our port is through Customs, and when Customs slows down, the processing of the cargo slows down, then that slows down all the operations, and then that has ripple effects. Just like I told you, the cargo goes throughout the country to every congressional district from this port. Well, that means every congressional district is affected in some way by the slowdown of cargo coming out of our port. That means that things that are being built, that are waiting for parts to come in or materials to come in, to further the economies in those regions, is affected by the slowdown here.
Are you able to let your representatives, all 435 of them, know? I mean, I know Alan Lowenthal technically services the port as a member of Congress, but wow.
Well, I mean,
are they aware of this?
I certainly hope they are, and it isn't just the ports talking to them. I mean, when we talk to the Retail Federation, for example, they're talking to people in Congress. I think everybody that's involved in international trade, and actually we're all involved in international trade, every single one of us, we have an opportunity to make that pitch to our elected representatives.
Well, one can only hope that the situation gets resolved in Washington. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Her name is Susan Wise. She is the president of the Board of Port Commissioners for the Long Beach Port. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition. Welcome to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Ester Hernandez. She is a professor at Cal State Los Angeles. She specializes in social studies and the question of immigration and immigration reform. And you look at the struggle of the undocumented.
That's right.
Why don't you talk to us most generally about that struggle? Even the word undocumented is struggling for some. So talk to us about it.
I just finished teaching a course to about 30 students at Cal State LA, and we talked about the struggles of the undocumented, which have to do with employment, have to do with legal status, and the increasing enforcement that is going on.
Right.
And so a lot of the topics that we talked about is those difficulties of talking about the issue, and you mentioned the issue of the using undocumented.
Right.
We had a conversation in our class about the fact that most of the time in the media the term illegal immigrant is used, and
it's interesting you mentioned that. I was having a conversation with an elected official, and this elected official was using the term illegal, an illegal alien, and I was using the term undocumented. And then he started saying, well, why are you saying undocumented? They are documented. They have documents from their home country. And again, I don't want to get involved in the debate because I'm just kind of the vessel for the conversation. I'm a neutral journalist. And I said, candidly, for me, I was just uncomfortable calling a human being illegal. It was a very difficult one for me. And it kind of, stopped him in his tracks a bit, because if you really do think about it, the word illegal, there's a lot of connotations behind that a person is illegal.
Yes.
Is that what you're hearing?
So a lot of the things that we deconstructed in our class was this issue of illegality and the enforcement and the association of the term with criminality. And what we emphasized, the issues are that people have a right to work, that they have, that they are human beings, that they have certain rights that are human rights, and that one of them is to not be called illegal because it dehumanizes them.
Do you know the history of how the term actually entered our vernacular? Because alien, even that word at some level is derogatory, one could argue. But if you really think about it, it simply means foreign. I mean, it's not. It does not as intentionally derogatory. How did the word illegal enter the vernacular? Do you know?
Well, in the 1920s, there were a lot of policies that were passed, and so the term alien and illegal alien became tied together.
That's interesting.
So, but one of the things that we emphasized in the course is that immigration issues or immigration violations are not criminal offenses, right? And they're administrative, and so we go into all of these kinds of issues of definition.
That is interesting. I bet you most people don't realize that. It's an administrative offense. It's not a criminal offense, as you describe.
I think that a lot of what we've seen since 1986 with immigration policies passed in 1996, there's been more of an emphasis on enforcement and sort of trying to push that connotation of alien and undocumented as something illegal. And that's something that we talk about definitely, and we emphasize this whole issue of this in the last instance involves human beings, and so just even the language that we use is really important.
In the wake of the 2012 presidential election, I think it's fair to say that the entire nation has taken a breath and really decided we need to think about how we are dealing with those individuals that are not in this country with papers, let's say. I really do feel as if this is a moment in time that historians will investigate and evaluate. Do you agree with me that we really are at a pivotal moment as it relates to the question of immigration policy?
I think we hope that definitely there's going to be comprehensive immigration reform. The exit polls have said that over 65% of people polled at the exit polls, right, said that they favor immigration reform. They favor a path to citizenship for people who are here undocumented.
And that is a tremendous shift. I mean, we're seeing so many shifts in terms of the views of Americans on a whole host of issues, from immigration reform to same-sex marriage. It is quite remarkable. I mean, I just look as kind of a student of history and think the times are a-changing. I mean, we really are seeing dramatic shifts, or are we?
I think there's always this ebb and flow of
right.
immigration enforcement, and tied to the enforcement, a lot of negative depictions of immigrants. And so I think that we see that, but I think at this moment the American public, as far as we know from poll after poll, they are saying we would like this issue to be addressed, and what they're saying is that they want to consider that comprehensive immigration reform. And I think that that's really important.
I want to talk about what we know as dreamers. Mm-hmm. It's a term that's used for children that were brought to this country before they hit majority. They don't have papers. Just as an anecdote, I was an attorney many years ago, and there was an intern in our office. She didn't even know she wasn't born in this country. Mm-hmm. We wanted to hire her, and we couldn't because she didn't have papers. She didn't even know it. Talk to us about the DREAM Act as implemented by the Obama administration, which gives these children, they could be adults now, the ability to be legal and work.
The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals is a program that is for children who arrive before they were 16 years old and have not turned, they're not over 30.
Right.
So there's all these deadlines that they have to meet, and it's an important program because they're going to be able to get a job, and they're going to have a relief from deportation at least as long as the program lasts.
So, as you study the undocumented, how has deferred action changed the families that have been impacted by their lack of documentation? I mean, I have to think it's a sea change.
Yes, it's a recent program. So basically, the number of people that are now receiving the deferred action is increasing, but it's under 100,000 at this moment.
Which is surprising. I would have thought it would be more.
So there's a lot of people who are eligible for it, but there's all these issues of having the documentation to be able to get it, and then waiting for the government to decide.
Let's kind of bring it to the human level. I mean, how is it affecting families?
I think it's really important because the young people are going to be able to get a job. Mm-hmm. They're going to be able to go forward with their dreams. They're not going to be on hold. So in a lot of ways, it helps the family by having this family member who will be able to exercise their employment capabilities, and perhaps even alleviate some of the burden on the family.
Yeah, but what about the economic aspect of this? Is it alleviating the stress? Are we seeing increased earnings for those that are able to apply for deferred action and therefore impact their entire family unit?
Well, we know that's something that we're going to see in the next few years, but we know that people who naturalize tend to earn more money than people who are not naturalized. So we know that legal status and naturalization has an effect on the economic well-being of the families. So we expect that it's going to be a positive effect.
So often when we think about immigration, we're focused on Central and South America. But is it true that this really is not just about our neighbors to the south?
One of the things that we did in my class was to look at the issue of the undocumented and look at it worldwide, and sort of to step back and sort of see, like, why is this issue occurring and who is it affecting? And we even looked at Europe, and we looked at the issues of different nationalities who are affected by that. There's only 40% of people who are undocumented are from other countries other than Central and South America. So the issue is broader than our neighbors.
Right, and it's so important that we realize that, because it is an important issue. If you had to guess, Professor, do you think we see immigration reform in this Congress?
We certainly see a lot of positive move towards a comprehensive immigration reform. Certainly everybody who advocates for the rights of immigrants and for the economic well-being of our state, which has one of the largest populations of undocumented, would like to see some form of comprehensive immigration reform, and it's important that it includes a path to citizenship.
Okay. Her name is Ester Hernandez, professor at Cal State Los Angeles. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.